delusions, for example, are usually justified or rationalized based on internal subjective experiences, right? Like, I think I'm the next Messiah because God told me this last night in a vision, sort of thing. Whereas when we talk about conspiracy theories, we're really talking about the theme of this meeting, which is I learned it based on information that I got from somewhere outside in the world. And so the model that I talk about, which I think of as a sort of normalizing, universalizing model to understand false belief, involves three components. One, Thilo just talked about, which is trust, or really mistrust. So that many people who believe in conspiracy theories kind of start with a perspective of, I don't trust this particular source. That leads to the next component, which is misinformation, which is why we're all here this week. So that when we don't trust authoritative sources of information, we then are more vulnerable and gravitate towards misinformational sources that reinforce our mistrust. And then the third component is motivated reasoning, which is a way to understand why people gravitate to specific sources and reject other sources based on their ideological affiliations. These days, that often means political affiliations, for example. So I think that model helps us to understand why all of us are vulnerable to false belief. Now, to answer the question, what I've been interested, particularly with that misinformation piece, is where are we getting information or misinformation from? And to me, the big conundrum now, and we heard sort of snippets in this from Governor Cox's talk yesterday, is that there's this crisis of we don't all trust or mistrust the same people, and we don't use the same informational sources or dismiss the same misinformational sources that other people do. And so that creates this sort of chaotic world. And I think clearly social media, I think the internet, cable TV, there's really been a lot of technological change over the past couple decades where it's now much easier to find sources that validate what we believe, no matter how fringy or outlandish, like flat earthers and that sort of thing. So for today, when we're talking about parasocial relationships, there has been this phenomenon over the past year that's been covered fairly widely in the media, at least in the US, about AI psychosis. And what this is, in a nutshell, is anecdotal reports of people who develop these immersive relationships with chatbots, where they have these long-lasting dialogues, and they end up going down what, in conspiracy theories we call this rabbit holes. Now people call this a spiral, where it's reinforcing beliefs that are sometimes really do seem to be the level of a delusion. For example, believing that the chatbot is a true entity, maybe it has a godlike entity, and then coming to believe that the user themselves is a godlike entity and has stumbled upon some secrets of the universe or some new mathematical or scientific discovery. And so that is a phenomenon. My colleagues and I were the first to publish a case report about this a couple months ago. And so that's an interesting phenomenon for me as a psychiatrist to talk about psychosis, but I also talk about that phenomenon being the canary in the coal mine. And to me, the greater risk, when we talk about psychological harms, is the way that new technologies like AI chatbots can reinforce false beliefs, not psychotic or delusional ones per se, but all sorts of false beliefs, whether it's political beliefs, anti-science beliefs, all of the things that I think can harm us as a society, and how people will then exploit and use this new technology to manipulate false beliefs on a global scale.